I invited my fiancée to watch my MMA fight. After I knocked out my opponent, I looked into the stands and saw her kissing a guy from my gym. The crowd was still cheering when I climbed out of the octagon and ran toward them. I never thought the best night of my life would turn into the worst in the span of about 40 seconds. The Cascade Regional Championship was everything I had been working toward for 3 years. 3 years of waking up at 5 in the morning to run before my day job at the warehouse. 3 years of getting punched in the face by guys who outweighed me by 30 pounds. 3 years of eating plain chicken and rice while my friends posted pictures of pizza and beer. All of it led to this moment in front of 8,000 screaming fans under lights, so bright I could barely see past the first few rows. My opponent Garrett was undefeated in 12 fights and had a reputation for breaking bones. The guy was a monster, 6'2" with arms like tree trunks and a ground game that had put 7 guys in the hospital. My coach Vincent spent 6 weeks drilling me on defensive grappling because everyone knew Garrett would try to take me down and snap something. Vincent was this old-school trainer who had cornered professionals back in the 90s and knew every dirty trick in the book. He kept telling me I had the speed advantage and that Garrett got sloppy when he got tired. The locker room before the fight was chaos. My sparring partner Bryce was wrapping my hands and telling me stupid jokes to keep me loose. Felix, who handled all my grappling training, was going over the game plan for the 100th time about staying off the cage and circling left. Rosalind, my striking coach, was shadowboxing in the corner and yelling at me to trust my jab. These 3 had been with me since I was a nobody, getting knocked out in amateur shows at community centers. But the person I really wanted there was Juliet. My fiancée had missed my last 6 fights because of her job in pharmaceutical sales. She traveled constantly and worked insane hours, but she promised me she would be there tonight no matter what. I had proposed to her 4 months earlier on her birthday, and she said yes immediately. We had been together for 2 years, and I loved her more than fighting, which was saying something because fighting was my whole life. She texted me 2 hours before the fight saying she was in her seat and could not wait to watch me win. I felt invincible after reading that message. The walk to the octagon was surreal. The crowd was deafening, and the energy felt electric on my skin. I could see signs with my name on them, and people wearing shirts with my face printed on them. This was a regional show, but it was being broadcast on a streaming service and scouts from the major promotions were supposed to be watching. A win here could change everything. Garrett came out looking like he wanted to murder me. The referee gave us instructions, and I touched gloves with him even though he barely acknowledged me. The bell rang, and my vision narrowed to just him and the space between us. The first round was a nightmare. Garrett caught me with a low kick that made my leg buckle, and then he shot in for a takedown before I could recover. He got me down and immediately went for an armbar that had me screaming inside my head. I could feel the pressure building in my elbow and knew I was about 3 seconds from either tapping out or having my arm snapped. The crowd was roaring, and I could hear Vincent screaming instructions that I could not process because all I could think about was not letting my arm break. I managed to roll out of it somehow and scrambled back to my feet with about 30 seconds left in the round. Garrett looked surprised that I escaped and came at me aggressive, throwing heavy punches that I mostly blocked, but a few got through. The round ended, and I limped back to my corner knowing I had just lost it on every judge's scorecard. Vincent was calm when I sat down. He put ice on my leg and told me Garrett had blown his gas tank trying to finish me. Rosalind was yelling that Garrett's hands were dropping after he threw combinations. Bryce was pouring water over my head and telling me I was tougher than that guy could ever be. My arm hurt like hell, but nothing felt broken. The second round started, and I could see immediately that Vincent was right. Garrett came out throwing the same heavy shots, but they were slower and his footwork was sloppy. I started circling and popping my jab into his face every time he tried to close distance. He was getting frustrated and started lunging forward with big hooks that missed by miles. I caught him coming in with a straight right hand that snapped his head back and his eyes went glassy for a second. That was when I knew I had him. I pressed forward and threw a combination that Rosalind had drilled into me 10,000 times. Left hook to the body, right hand upstairs, left hook over the top. The last hook caught Garrett perfectly on the temple, and his knees buckled. He fell face first onto the canvas, and the referee jumped in waving his arms before I could follow up. The fight was over. The arena exploded. I could not hear anything except this wall of sound crashing over me. I jumped onto the cage and started screaming because 2 years of doubt and pain and sacrifice had just paid off in the most violent and beautiful way possible. The referee raised my hand, and the announcer declared me the winner by knockout. Garrett was still on the ground being checked by the doctor, but he gave me a thumbs up to show he was okay. I scanned the crowd looking for Juliet. Vincent had told me before the fight that she was sitting in the VIP section that the promotion reserved for fighters' families and sponsors. My eyes adjusted to the lights, and I found the section on the far side of the arena. I saw her immediately because she was wearing the red dress I had bought her for our anniversary. She was kissing someone, not just a peck or a friendly thing. A full-on passionate kiss with her hands in his hair and his arms wrapped around her waist. The guy pulled back for a second, and I recognized him instantly. Damien, a veteran fighter from Steel Forge Gym who had been mentoring me for the past 8 months. My brain could not process what I was seeing. The crowd was still cheering, and the announcer was still talking, and my corner was trying to hug me, but I could not move. I just stared at Juliet kissing Damien in the VIP section of the arena where she was supposed to be cheering for me. Then I saw my younger sister Iris standing next to them. She was crying and trying to pull Juliet away from Damien. Iris looked devastated and kept tugging on Juliet's arm while Juliet ignored her. Damien saw me staring, and his face went white. He said something to Juliet, and she turned to look at me. Even from across the arena, I could see the moment she realized I had seen everything. I climbed out of the octagon without thinking. My legs were still shaky from the fight, and I nearly fell getting through the cage door, but Bryce caught me. Vincent was asking me what was wrong and where I was going, but I pushed past him and started walking toward the VIP section. The crowd thought I was doing a victory lap and started cheering louder. People were reaching out to touch me, and cameras were following me, but all I could see was Juliet standing frozen in that red dress. Security tried to stop me at the barrier separating the floor seats from the VIP section, but Vincent caught up and told them to let me through. He had seen what I had seen. We got to the section, and I climbed over 2 rows of seats to reach them. Juliet had tears running down her face and was trying to say something, but no words came out. Damien had his hands up like he was trying to calm down a wild animal. Iris grabbed me before I could get to them. My sister was sobbing and kept saying she was sorry over and over. She told me she had known for 3 weeks and tried to handle it quietly without ruining my fight camp. She had confronted Juliet twice, and Juliet promised both times that it was over and that she would never see Damien again. The crowd around us had gone quiet. Everyone in the VIP section was staring and pulling out their phones to record. I could see the confusion spreading through the arena as people realized something was happening that was not part of the show. Then Damien's wife Simone appeared out of nowhere. I had met her a few times at gym events, and she always seemed nice if a little reserved. She looked at Damien and Juliet, and her face transformed into something I had never seen before. Pure rage. She screamed something I could not understand and launched herself at Juliet with her hands going for her throat. Security finally responded and grabbed Simone before she could reach Juliet. More guards showed up and formed a barrier between all of us. The head of security was shouting into his radio and pointing at the exits. Juliet was hyperventilating, and Damien looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. Iris was still holding on to me and begging me not to do anything stupid. Vincent pulled me back toward the barrier. He was talking, but I could not hear him over the blood rushing in my ears. I looked around and saw hundreds of people recording everything on their phones. The big screens in the arena had cut away from replays of my knockout to show what was happening in the crowd. 8,000 people were watching my life fall apart in real time. Someone from the promotion grabbed me and started pulling me toward the back. I let them lead me away because I could not think of anything else to do. The last thing I saw before leaving the arena floor was Juliet reaching toward me and mouthing words I could not hear while security held her back. Damien had his arm around her shoulders, and that image burned into my brain harder than anything Garrett had done to me in the octagon. The medical room was freezing and too bright. A doctor started checking the cut above my eye that had opened up during the fight. He was asking me questions about my vision and whether I felt dizzy, but I could not focus on what he was saying. Vincent sent Bryce and Felix to find out what was happening outside. Rosalind sat next to me without saying anything, and that somehow helped more than words would have. My phone started vibrating in my bag across the room. Then it started ringing continuously. Bryce came back and told me the video was already online and spreading everywhere. Felix returned with Iris, who looked destroyed. She sat down and started explaining everything she knew while I got stitched up and tried to understand how the best moment of my athletic career had turned into this. The stitches were barely finished when Vincent came back with Bryce and Felix looking like they had just witnessed a murder. Vincent closed the door to the medical room and locked it, which immediately told me this was about to get worse. I was still sitting on the examination table with an ice pack on my arm and dried blood on my chest from the cut above my eye. The doctor had left to file paperwork with the athletic commission, and it was just my team, my sister, and whatever bomb they were about to drop. Bryce spoke first. He told me that Damien had been training someone at a rival gym called Ironclad across town for the past month. Not just anyone. Juliet's ex-boyfriend Wade. I remembered Wade vaguely from when Juliet and I first started dating. She had mentioned him a few times as someone she dated in college who never really moved on. I had never met him, and Juliet always said he lived in another state and was not a factor in her life anymore. Apparently, that was a lie because Wade had moved back to the area 8 months ago and had started training in mixed martial arts specifically because I was a fighter. Bryce had a friend who trained at Ironclad, who sent him photos of Wade working with Damien in private sessions. The timeline matched up perfectly with when Damien started mentoring me at Steel Forge Gym. While Damien was teaching me techniques and helping me prepare for fights, he was simultaneously training the obsessive ex-boyfriend of my fiancée at a completely different facility. Iris started crying harder when Bryce showed me the photos on his phone. She said she only found out about the affair 3 weeks ago when she borrowed Juliet's laptop to print something for work. Juliet had left her email open, and Iris saw messages between Juliet, Damien, and Wade discussing my training schedule. Not just casual mentions, but detailed breakdowns of what I was working on each week, what injuries I was dealing with, and what my game plan was for upcoming fights. Felix dropped the next bomb. He had seen Damien meeting with a man named Angelo at a coffee shop 2 weeks before my fight. Angelo was known in the local fighting community as someone who fixed fights and ran illegal gambling operations across 3 states. Felix did not think much of it at the time because fighters sometimes got approached by shady people and most were smart enough to turn them down. But seeing Damien with Angelo for over an hour made Felix uncomfortable enough that he mentioned it to Vincent the next day. Vincent had apparently been quietly investigating Damien ever since that conversation. He did not want to tell me during fight camp because he knew it would destroy my focus and potentially ruin the biggest opportunity of my career. Vincent had contacts in the athletic commission and had asked them to watch for unusual betting patterns on my fight. What they found was that someone had placed massive bets against me through offshore accounts in the days leading up to the fight. The kind of money that suggested inside information. Rosalind finally spoke up. She told me she had recognized Wade at one of my open training sessions 2 weeks ago. Open sessions were supposed to be for fans and media to watch fighters prepare, but she noticed Wade filming everything on his phone from multiple angles. When she approached him to ask what publication he was with, he gave her a fake name and left quickly. She got his license plate number before he drove away and ran it through a database that a friend of hers in law enforcement had access to. The car was registered to Wade at an address 15 minutes from the gym. The room felt like it was spinning. I had just fought the toughest opponent of my career with an arm that nearly got broken and won by knockout in front of the biggest crowd I had ever performed for. And now I was finding out that my fiancée, my mentor, and her psychotic ex-boyfriend had been conspiring against me for months. The pieces were coming together in a way that made me want to throw up. Vincent's phone rang, and he answered it immediately. His face went from concerned to furious in about 5 seconds. He hung up and told us that Patricia, the athletic commission coordinator, was on her way to the medical room with security footage that we needed to see immediately. She arrived 3 minutes later with a laptop and 2 security guards who positioned themselves outside the door. Patricia was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who had been working in combat sports for decades. She set up her laptop on the counter and pulled up footage from the gym's security cameras over the past 2 months. The gym had cameras in the lobby, the main training area, and the hallways, but not in the locker rooms or offices. What she showed us was Damien letting Wade into the gym after hours on 7 different occasions over the past 6 weeks. The footage showed Wade going into the equipment room where fighters kept their training gear and personal items. He was in there for 20 to 30 minutes each time while Damien stood watch in the hallway. On one occasion, the footage caught Wade photographing documents that looked like medical records and training logs. On another visit, he was setting up a small camera in the corner of the equipment room, pointing at the area where fighters wrapped their hands and discussed strategy before training sessions. Patricia told us she had discovered something even worse. Harper, who worked as the receptionist at Steel Forge Gym, had been accessing the digital files of fighters without authorization. The gym kept records of injuries, medical clearances, and training notes in a cloud-based system that only coaches and management were supposed to access. Harper's login had been used to view my records over 40 times in the past 3 months, including the day before my fight when she downloaded my complete medical history and training camp notes. Bryce asked the obvious question about why Harper would do that. Patricia pulled up text messages between Harper and Wade that the athletic commission had obtained through a subpoena after the arena incident went viral. The messages showed that Harper and Wade were in a romantic relationship and had been for at least 4 months. Wade had convinced Harper that I was abusing Juliet and that they needed to gather evidence to protect her. Harper believed she was helping save someone from a dangerous situation. The manipulation was insane. Wade had created an entire fictional narrative where I was the villain and he was the hero rescuing his ex-girlfriend from harm. He had weaponized Harper's access to confidential information by making her think she was doing something noble. He had probably done something similar with Damien, though we did not know what leverage he had used there yet. Felix asked if the fight itself had been compromised. Patricia said the investigation was ongoing, but preliminary analysis showed that the betting patterns suggested people knew I had an injured elbow going into the fight. That information was in my medical records that Harper had accessed. The offshore bets against me specifically predicted that Garrett would win by submission in the first round, targeting my arm. When I escaped the armbar and won by knockout instead, someone lost a lot of money. Vincent was pacing the room and looked angrier than I had ever seen him. He said that if Damien had been feeding information to gamblers, then every fighter at Steel Forge Gym was potentially compromised. Other fighters' records might have been accessed. Other training sessions might have been filmed. The integrity of the entire gym was now in question, and that could destroy the reputation he had spent 20 years building. Iris told us there was more. She pulled up emails on her phone that she had forwarded to herself from Juliet's laptop before confronting her. The emails included conversations between Juliet and Wade going back 6 months, where Wade was systematically convincing her that I was cheating on her with multiple women at the gym. He had created fake social media accounts with photos of me that were clearly doctored to make it look like I was messaging other women. He had sent Juliet screenshots of text conversations that never happened. He had built an elaborate fiction designed to turn her against me. Patricia was taking notes on everything we were telling her. She said the Athletic Commission was opening a formal investigation and that federal authorities might get involved if the gambling conspiracy was as extensive as it appeared. She suspended Harper immediately and said that Damien would be suspended pending the investigation. She also told me that I needed to secure my apartment and change all my passwords, because if Wade had been this thorough in gathering information about my fighting career, he probably had access to my personal life too. My phone was still blowing up in my bag. Bryce grabbed it and started scrolling through the messages. His face went pale, and he handed me the phone without saying anything. The video of the confrontation in the arena had over 5 million views already and was trending on every social media platform. News outlets were calling it the most dramatic post-fight moment in regional MMA history. My knockout of Garrett was almost an afterthought in the coverage. I spent that night in a hotel because I could not face going back to the apartment I shared with Juliet. Vincent paid for the room, and Bryce stayed with me to make sure I did not do anything stupid. I did not sleep at all. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Juliet kissing Damien, or I replayed the armbar that almost ended my career, or I imagined Wade sitting in some dark room planning all of this like a psychopath. My phone kept buzzing with messages and calls from numbers I did not recognize. Reporters wanting statements. Fighters from other gyms offering support. Random people telling me they saw the video and felt sorry for me. The only call I answered was from my older brother Quincy at 6 in the morning. Quincy was a lawyer in Seattle who specialized in fraud cases, and the second he heard what happened, he got on a plane. He arrived at my hotel room at 9 with a briefcase full of documents and a look on his face that told me he had found something bad. We sat at the small table in the room while Bryce made coffee and Quincy laid out papers in front of me like he was presenting evidence to a jury. Juliet and Damien had taken out a joint loan 2 months ago for $85,000. Quincy had pulled records through contacts he had at various financial institutions and found the loan application. It used my name and forged my signature as a co-signer, even though I had never seen the paperwork. The money had been transferred to an account that Quincy traced to a shell company owned by Angelo, the fight fixer that Felix had seen Damien meeting with at the coffee shop. Quincy explained that this was a classic gambling scam. Angelo would take bets on fights and then work with people on the inside to make sure the outcomes went the way he needed them to go. Damien and Juliet had borrowed money from Angelo's operation to place their own bets against me in the fight with Garrett. The plan was that I would lose, probably by submission when Garrett broke my already injured arm, and they would collect enough winnings to pay back the loan and have money left over to disappear together. But I won instead, which meant they now owed Angelo $85,000 plus whatever interest and penalties came with failing to deliver the outcome he paid for. Bryce asked why they would bet against me if Damien had been training me and knew I was good. Quincy said that was the genius of the scheme. Damien had been deliberately teaching me flawed techniques and giving me bad advice during training camp to make me vulnerable. The information that Harper accessed from my medical records showed I had a partially torn ligament in my elbow that was being managed with physical therapy and would be a weakness Garrett could exploit. Damien knew about the injury because he was my mentor and had been there when the gym doctor examined me. He fed that information to Angelo, who then structured the betting to focus on a first-round submission. My head was pounding. I asked Quincy how Juliet got involved in something this serious. He showed me bank statements that indicated Juliet had been receiving payments from Wade for 3 months before the loan happened. Small amounts at first, a few $100s here and there, but escalating to thousands in the weeks before my fight. Quincy believed Wade had been bankrolling the entire operation and using Damien as the inside man, while positioning himself as Juliet's savior from her supposedly abusive fighter boyfriend. There was a knock at the door, and Vincent came in with 3 other fighters from Steel Forge Gym. Pax was a heavyweight who had been training there for 5 years. Soren was a rising prospect in the featherweight division. Whitney was one of the few women fighting professionally out of our gym and had a reputation for being smart and observant. Vincent said they had information that I needed to hear directly from them. Pax went first. He told me that Damien had approached him 8 months ago with an offer to throw a fight in exchange for $20,000. Pax refused immediately and reported it to Vincent, but there was no proof and Damien denied it when confronted. Vincent had kept a closer eye on Damien after that, but did not have enough evidence to kick him out of the gym. Now it made sense why Damien had started mentoring me around the same time. He was looking for someone else to manipulate after Pax turned him down. Soren said Damien had made a similar offer to him 6 months ago. The amount was smaller, only $10,000, but the pitch was the same. Throw a fight against a specific opponent and collect easy money. Soren also refused and told his manager, but again there was no concrete proof. His manager advised him to stay away from Damien and not train with him anymore, which Soren had done. Whitney had the most disturbing story. She said Damien never approached her about throwing fights, but she had noticed him watching her train with unusual intensity. He would film her sessions on his phone and ask detailed questions about her strategy and preparation. She thought he was just being a supportive teammate until she saw him at a bar 3 months ago meeting with her upcoming opponent's coach. They were having drinks and looking at video on a tablet that she was pretty sure showed her training footage. Her opponent knew things in that fight that should have been surprises, specific combinations and defensive reactions that Whitney had only drilled in private sessions. Vincent was furious. He said this meant Damien had been compromising fighters at Steel Forge Gym for at least 8 months and possibly longer. The gym's reputation was built on producing honest fighters who won or lost on merit, and now that entire foundation was in question. Sponsors might pull out. The Athletic Commission might investigate every fight involving anyone from the gym. Fighters might leave to train elsewhere because they could not trust that their preparation was secure. My phone rang, and it was Patricia from the Athletic Commission. She was calling to tell me that the investigation had expanded rapidly overnight. Federal agents from a task force that handled sports gambling fraud had gotten involved after seeing the viral video and the media attention. They were executing search warrants on Angelo's businesses and had already seized financial records that showed the extent of the betting conspiracy. She also said that Damien had reached out to her through a lawyer requesting a meeting because he wanted to cooperate with authorities in exchange for protection. Quincy told me to go to that meeting. He said we needed to hear what Damien knew and that his cooperation likely meant he was terrified of Angelo's people coming after him for the money he lost when I won the fight. We arranged to meet at the Athletic Commission office that afternoon with Patricia, Damien's lawyer, and federal agents who were running the gambling investigation. The meeting room was tense. Damien looked like he had aged 10 years overnight. He had a black eye and a split lip that had not been there at the fight. His lawyer was a public defender, which told me he could not afford private representation. Patricia sat at the head of the table with 2 federal agents in suits who introduced themselves, but I immediately forgot their names. Damien's lawyer explained that his client was willing to provide complete cooperation regarding the gambling conspiracy and related criminal activities in exchange for witness protection and reduced charges. Damien would not make eye contact with me. He started talking, and what came out was worse than anything Quincy had uncovered. Angelo's operation had been running for over 3 years across multiple states and had fixed dozens of fights in regional promotions. Damien had gotten involved 18 months ago when he accumulated gambling debts of his own, and Angelo offered him a way out. At first it was just providing information about other fighters, then it escalated to Damien throwing his own fights, and eventually Angelo wanted him to recruit others. Wade had approached Angelo 6 months ago with a specific proposal to target me because of his obsession with Juliet. Angelo saw an opportunity to make serious money on a rising prospect's fall and greenlit the operation. Wade had done extensive research on me and identified Juliet as the vulnerability he could exploit. He started the fake social media campaign to make her think I was cheating, then positioned himself as the friend she could confide in. Damien was brought in to get close to me at the gym and ensure the technical sabotage would work. Harper was manipulated into providing access to my medical records by being told I was dangerous. Everything was coordinated by Wade, with Angelo providing the financial backing and the gambling infrastructure. The federal agent asked Damien about the assault. Damien admitted that Angelo's enforcers had beaten him last night after the fight results came in and the bets were lost. They told him he had 1 week to come up with the money or they would kill him. That was why he was cooperating now. He was more afraid of Angelo than he was of prison. The promotion called me 3 days after the meeting with Damien. They wanted to offer me something that would normally take years to earn. A title eliminator fight on their next major card in 10 weeks. The winner would get a shot at the regional championship and almost certainly get noticed by the national promotions that were already circling after my knockout of Garrett went viral. I told them I needed time to think about it, but Vincent was already planning the training camp before I hung up the phone. Wade disappeared the day after Damien started cooperating with federal agents. His apartment was empty when authorities went to arrest him, and his car was found abandoned at a bus station 40 miles away. For 3 days nobody knew where he was, and I slept with a baseball bat next to my bed, because Quincy warned me that cornered obsessives do unpredictable things. The media coverage intensified when news broke that there was a manhunt for the man who orchestrated the conspiracy. My knockout became secondary to the scandal, and every outlet wanted me to give interviews that my lawyer told me to refuse. Iris called me on the 4th day, crying so hard I could barely understand her. She said police had just left her apartment after questioning her about Wade's possible whereabouts. They told her that when they searched Wade's apartment after he fled, they found things that made this much darker than a gambling scheme. His bedroom walls were covered with photos of Juliet spanning 7 years. Pictures from college, pictures from her current job, pictures of her with me that had been printed out and marked up with red ink. Some of the photos of me had crosshairs drawn over my face. Others had notes written in the margins about my training schedule and fight record. The police also found notebooks filled with detailed plans. Wade had been tracking Juliet's movements and relationships since they broke up 7 years ago. Every boyfriend she had was documented with notes about their jobs, their habits, and how long the relationships lasted. But the notes about me were different. Pages and pages of research about MMA training, about common injuries fighters sustained, about how long recovery took from specific types of damage. He had written out scenarios where I would be hurt badly enough in fights that I would have to retire, and in those scenarios he calculated how long it would take before Juliet left me and who she would turn to for support. The federal agent leading the investigation told Quincy that Wade had not just been planning to fix my fight. He had been planning to have me seriously injured or killed in the Octagon and make it look like a tragic accident. The information he fed to Angelo and Damien was designed to get Garrett to break my arm badly enough that I would never fight again. If that did not work, there were backup plans involving other fighters in other matches. Wade was prepared to spend years destroying me piece by piece until Juliet had no choice but to come back to him. They caught Wade at the Canadian border, trying to cross using a fake passport. He had $83,000 in cash in his car along with another notebook that had Juliet's current address and daily schedule written out in detail. When they arrested him, he was calm and told the officers that he was just going to pick up his girlfriend and take her somewhere safe. He genuinely believed that once I was out of the picture, Juliet would want to be with him. Harper took a plea deal for the medical records violations and received 18 months in federal prison. She cried during her sentencing and apologized to me directly in the courtroom. She said Wade had shown her fabricated evidence that made her believe I was dangerous and that she thought she was protecting someone. The judge did not care about her intentions and said that privacy violations in healthcare were serious regardless of motivation. Juliet tried to contact me dozens of times over the following weeks. She sent emails, text messages, letters delivered to the gym, and even showed up at my hotel once before security removed her. She claimed that Wade had manipulated her completely and that she had no idea about the gambling conspiracy or the extent of his obsession. Quincy obtained her text messages through discovery in the federal case and showed me proof that she knew more than she admitted. Messages between her and Wade from 2 weeks before my fight discussed how much money they would split after I lost. Messages between her and Damien talked about my elbow injury and whether it would be enough for Garrett to finish me early. The worst message was one she sent to Wade the morning of my fight. She wrote that she hoped it would be over quickly so we could move on with our lives and she would not have to pretend anymore. That message killed whatever small part of me still wanted to believe she was a victim in all of this. I took the title eliminator fight and spent 10 weeks training harder than I ever had in my life. Vincent brought in new coaches who did not know Damien and rebuilt my technique from the ground up to fix everything that had been sabotaged. The fight sold out in 2 days because everyone wanted to see what would happen to the fighter from the viral video. My opponent was a tough veteran named Garrett who I had already beaten, but this time he requested the rematch personally. He told reporters that he respected me for handling the situation with dignity and wanted to test himself against me when I was at my best instead of compromised by people working against me. The fight was technical and brutal. We went all 3 rounds, and I won by decision in what the commentators called a masterpiece of defensive fighting and counter-striking. After the final bell, Garrett hugged me and whispered that I was going to be a champion someday. The crowd gave us a standing ovation that lasted 5 minutes. Juliet was there. I saw her sitting alone in the upper deck, wearing sunglasses, even though we were indoors. After my hand was raised, she tried to come down to the floor, but security stopped her. Not because I had asked them to, but because Simone, Damien's ex-wife, was standing at the barrier and refused to let her through. Simone and I had started talking a few weeks after everything exploded. Two people who got betrayed by the same people, finding solidarity in shared trauma. It started as coffee to compare notes for the federal case and became something more. She understood the specific pain of having someone you trusted destroy you publicly, and she did not need me to explain why I woke up angry every morning. We started dating officially a month before the title eliminator, and she cornered me for that fight alongside Vincent. When Juliet saw Simone standing there with my team, she turned and left the arena. I never saw her again. I heard later that she moved to another state and changed her name on social media. She sent one final email 6 months later apologizing and saying she was in therapy, trying to understand how she let Wade manipulate her. I did not respond. Wade's trial happened 8 months after his arrest. He was charged with fraud, conspiracy, stalking, identity theft, and a dozen other counts related to the gambling scheme and his obsession with Juliet. Quincy made me attend so I could give a victim impact statement. I stood in front of the courtroom and told the judge that Wade had tried to destroy my career, my relationship, and possibly my life because he could not accept that someone he dated 7 years ago had moved on. The judge gave him 8 years in federal prison and a permanent restraining order preventing him from contacting Juliet or me ever again. Damien entered witness protection after testifying against Angelo and the gambling network. The federal case brought down operations in 6 states and resulted in 43 arrests. Damien sent me a letter through his lawyer 3 months after disappearing. He apologized for everything and explained that Angelo's people had threatened to hurt his family if he did not cooperate, though he admitted greed played a major role in his decisions too. He said he watched my title eliminator fight from wherever he was hiding and that I looked better than I ever had working with him. I burned the letter after reading it. 6 months after the scandal broke, I signed a contract with a major national promotion. My first fight on the big stage was against a ranked opponent, and I won by submission in the second round. Simone was in my corner, and we celebrated afterward by getting engaged in the Octagon during the post-fight interview. The crowd went insane, and the moment trended even bigger than the original scandal video. Vincent's gym became famous for surviving the integrity crisis. Membership tripled after he kicked out everyone connected to Damien and implemented new security protocols. He started a program teaching young fighters about the dangers of gambling corruption and invited me to speak at seminars about recognizing manipulation. Steel Forge Gym became known as the place that produced honest fighters who would rather lose clean than win dirty. I fought my way into the top 10 rankings over the next year. Every victory felt like erasing another piece of what Wade and Damien tried to do to me. Simone traveled to every fight, and we got married in a small ceremony with just our families and my team from the gym. She understood the violence and sacrifice in ways Juliet never did because she had lived through her own version of betrayal and came out stronger. A year after everything happened, I was warming up backstage before defending my regional title when I ran into Garrett. He was fighting on the same card, and we talked for a few minutes about training and upcoming opponents. He told me that the rematch we had was the best fight of his career and that he was glad everything worked out for me. We shook hands, and I realized that the night I thought ruined my life actually saved it by removing every toxic person and forcing me to rebuild from scratch. The title defense went perfectly. I won by knockout in the first round, and afterward, I used the microphone to thank everyone who supported me through the worst period of my life. I talked about how betrayal can either destroy you or become fuel for something greater. I mentioned Vincent and my team and Simone, and even Iris, who had tried to protect me despite being just as hurt by everything. I did not mention Juliet or Wade or Damien because they did not deserve space in my moment of triumph. 2 years after the viral video, I was ranked 5th nationally and headlining shows that sold out arenas 10 times bigger than the one where everything fell apart. Simone was pregnant with our first child, and we bought a house near the gym so I could walk to training. Vincent threw me a party when the rankings came out, and every fighter from Steel Forge showed up to celebrate. The gym that almost died from scandal was now producing championship-level talent and turning away applicants because we had more demand than space. I never forgot what Wade tried to do. The notebooks full of plans to destroy me. The years of obsessive stalking. The manipulation of everyone around me to orchestrate my downfall. But I also never let it define me. I took the worst betrayal imaginable and turned it into motivation that carried me further than I ever would have gone without it. The night Juliet kissed Damien in front of 8,000 people was supposed to be my destruction. Instead, it became the beginning of everything I had actually been working toward all along.